Shadow Secretary of State for Transport, Middlesbrough MP Andy McDonald, live on the line to us. Andy, good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
And you're at a launch event, aren't you, for this morning?
Several, yeah. I've started my journey in Middlesbrough, then I went to Darlington, and we did some interviews and campaigning there. And I'm now in York, where we've done the same thing. So, and then on to London King's Cross. So it's a whole journey down the East Coast line, drawing attention to these issues.
And tell me why you and the Labour Party feel so strongly about renationalising the whole network.
Well, because it's mentally costly and wasteful, and what you get is the mayhem we've seen on the GTR line in the south and across Northern Rail across our region, where you've got disparate interests, all blaming each other, and nobody taking responsibility, let alone the Secretary of State, and no guiding mind for the railway. And that's often been identified as the biggest deficit in our system. There isn't anybody with overall control making sure it works as an integrated undertaking. And really, we've got to think about what's our railway for, and it's got to be about those connecting people, businesses, communities and economies to let us build a thriving society for everyone. And I'm afraid at the moment, it's purely predicated on allowing private enterprise and private operators to come in and extract as much value as they can for their own sake, and not about what's in the public interest. Yeah, and that's what we're focusing on.
But is it really broken, Mr. McDonald? Because train travel has never been more popular in this country, and new investment, new money is going in.
Well, it's totally broken, Mike. The franchise system has completely and utterly collapsed, where there's no competition, direct awards are made, extensions of contracts are made, franchises collapse. The industry recognises that this system does not work. And in terms of investment, you're talking about major subsidies going into these operators, and the investment that they allege to bring is funding. It's purely financing arrangements. The actual cost is borne by taxpayers and by passengers, not by these people who want to derive profit from the whole enterprise. So it is broken, it needs changing, and we need it to work for everyone, not just for these people.
Right. So you are effectively wanting to return to British Rail, aren't you? Now,
No.
All right,
no,
what's the difference?
We are not return. Well, there's a huge difference. British Rail was a year-on-year settlement, and it was remarkable that it kept going in those circumstances. Engineers keeping trains on the track on a shoestring budget, and it could be 3 months into an annual budget and not know what money they had to invest in the railway. So it was a remarkable undertaking. In fact, per kilometre mile, it was more efficient than what we have now. So people talk about British Rail in sort of musical terms, about the sandwiches and the rest of it. We've got to have an intelligent discussion about it. And what we're proposing is a wholly different model, one with a long-term vision of what we want for our railway industry and long-term settlements so that investment can be made and planned for. Companies can invest in their own businesses, invest in their people who are going to be needed to build the railway we want for the decades ahead. So it's a misnomer to think that we would go back to a previous structure that doesn't bear any relation to the one that I'm talking about today.
But isn't it true that as soon as something, largely speaking, as soon as something is publicly owned, it starts to run inefficiently and doesn't run as effectively?
Well,
I've never understood that, but it's true.
Well, you say it's true, but do we think that this is efficient, where we've got an industry readiness board with all the disparate interests trying to work out a new timetable, left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing, where you've got cancelled trains, delayed trains, you've got absolute mayhem and chaos on the Northern Line and on GTR in the south. Do you think that's working? Do we think a 30% increase in fares since 2010, pricing people off the railways? The railway isn't growing in number, the numbers are reducing. Season ticket sales are down, ridership is down.
That's not true, is it?
No, Mike, forgive me, I do know what I'm talking about, and ridership numbers are starting to slip, and the sales of season tickets across the country are down 8 and 9% year on year. This is a significant matter, and if people are not having any faith and confidence in the railway, and they're making the modal shift they're making is to get out of trains and into their cars. That's got to be wrong for congestion, for the environment. It's the wrong way to go. So we need to arrest this, and now we want a growing, thriving railway that sits opposite our growing, thriving economy, and the two things are inextricably linked.
Right. What should Chris Grayling do?
Resign. He should have resigned a long time ago. We should not be in this position, and it's only his intransigence and stubbornness. He's been absolutely forced to embrace the public sector operator of last resort on the East Coast. His preference would have been to continue to hand this out directly to allow people to continue to profit out of the railway. And he's just got an obsessive ideology that privatisation is the end game, no matter what the consequences. And it's the wrong end of the telescope to look from. We should be looking at what works for our society, our communities, and our economies, not the other way around.
But you wouldn't be happy you ever took over, as long as the Conservatives are in power and in favour of privatisation.
Well, if you obsessively look at privatisation, so let's privatise social care, education, National Health Service, our railway, and let's just have it as a feeding frenzy for every individual and every corporate entity to try to make money out of as your objective, then that fails society. It's plain as a pikestaff that will not work if that is your motivation. Your motivation should be a public service to support our economy, not to simply extract value from it. And I'm afraid that has been the Tories' dogma and mantra from time immemorial, and it has failed. It has completely and utterly failed, and we need to change it.
Andy MacDonald, thank you. Andy, of course, is the Shadow Secretary of State for Transport and Middlesbrough MP.